Hello everyone, my name is Maggie and this is my video on the various secret police services in Germany and Russia during World War II and the Cold War. In this video I will cover the formation, leadership, organization, operations, impact and effects, resistance, and destruction of each organization. I will also do a compare and contrast of each at the end. The Gestapo was formed as a result of Hermann Göring combining the executive and judicial branches together in 1933. After its creation, the organization went through several administration changes. In 1934, it was under the administration of the Secret Service National Leader. Then the German Chief of Police made it a sub-office of the Security Police in 1936, after Hitler declared the unification of all police forces in the Reich. The final change was made in 1939, when it was under the administration of the Reich Main Security Office and was considered a sister to the German Secret Service. As I mentioned earlier, Hermann Göring was the founder. The first commander of the Gestapo was Rudolf Dales until 1936, when Hitler named Heinrich Himmler as the Chief of Police and Heinrich Müller as the Chief of Operations. Most of the Gestapo leadership didn't change and were only relieved of command when the Nazis were defeated in 1945. The Gestapo had roughly 32,000 members by the time it was dissolved in 1945, but at one point during World War II there were around 46,000 members. The Gestapo was organized into several departments, with 3 to 6 divisions underneath each. Department A focused on political opponents. This department had 4 divisions focusing on communists, counter-sabotage, reactionaries and liberals, and assassinations. Department B focused on sects and churches with divisions for Catholics, Protestants, Freemasons, and Jews. Department C was Central Administration. This department was responsible for every personnel file in the Gestapo. Department D was for occupied territories. This department had everything from the political opponents and sects and churches departments, as well as a special combat detachment for every territory occupied by Germany. Department E was entirely focused on counterintelligence. They had a division for gathering intelligence in the Reich, policy formation, and gathering intelligence in the north, east, south, and west. One of the main missions of the Gestapo was counterintelligence, as well as dealing with resistance movements throughout Germany and other countries. The Gestapo was also well known for its monitoring and prosecution of its citizens. It had the authority to investigate treason, espionage, sabotage, and attacks on the Nazi Party in Germany. With their ability to act without judicial rule, this power was widely misused. Fear was their number one weapon. Using fear of the police and creating paranoia about whom you could trust left staggering impacts on the people. As mentioned in previous sections, with members of the Gestapo being able to act without judicial rule, people could be imprisoned and disappear while in custody. They were also the ones who carried out raids into people's homes. More detailed accounts of what they did could be found in Klemper's diaries, I Will Bear Witness, and in other documentaries. The Gestapo faced resistance from 4 main groups. They faced religious dissent from the churches who did not want to follow the extreme amount of anti-Semitism and neo-pagan ideologies. This resistance is what caused Department B to watch the churches so closely. Students also protested against the Nazi regime. There were several non-violent student resistance groups, but they were often stalled by the fear of the Gestapo. In 1943, the Gestapo arrested and executed several student leaders, which led to a drop in open resistance. Operation Valkyrie is also one of the most famous resistance movements led by senior members of the German military. They attempted to assassinate Hitler via a hidden bomb, but Hitler was only slightly injured and those involved were executed. The Gestapo was dissolved on May 8, 1945, when the Allies won the war. Most of the leadership of the Gestapo was tried and received punishment during the Nuremberg trials from 1945 to 1946. The Ministry for State Security, also known as the Stasi, was formed on February 8, 1950, as the official state security service for the GDR. Wilhelm Zaser was the first minister of the Stasi, with Erich Mielke as his deputy. After Wilhelm tried to eliminate Walter Ulbricht in 1953, he was removed and replaced by Ernest Wolbert. Ernest resigned in 1957, and Mielke took over until 1989, when Wolfgang Schwantitz succeeded him. As of 1989, there were 91,015 people registered as members of the Stasi. The Stasi was divided into different administrations for specific purposes, similar to how the Gestapo was divided into department and divisions. Administration 12 was responsible for monitoring mail and telephone communications. Administration 2000 operated an unofficial network of informants. The Administration of Heavy Industry and Research and Security of the Economy was responsible for the protection against sabotage and espionage. The Division of Garbage Analysis was responsible for analyzing garbage for Western food or materials that may have been made in the West. The Guards Regiment protected high-ranking government and party buildings and personnel. The Main Administration for Reconnaissance focused on West and NATO operations and intelligence. The Main Administration for the Struggle Against Suspicious Persons was responsible for the surveillance of foreigners traveling or living in the GDR. The main coordinating administration of the Ministry for State Security was responsible for the cooperation with Soviet intelligence agencies, like the KGB. The main Department for Communication Security and Personnel Protection provided security for national leadership and communication systems for the government. The main operations of the Stasi were to spy on the population and censor anything that didn't fall in line with the GDR's version of socialism. They also focused on counter-assassinations and even assassinating those who were political enemies. The Stasi were also trained in espionage and were responsible for training several of the other communist countries' police services. Once the wall was made in Berlin, they were also responsible for keeping people in and questioning those who attempted to escape the wall. Because of the intense amount of surveillance, some people in Germany still don't trust the government and are very wary of the use of government surveillance. The massive amount of Stasi informers created mistrust and fear, making it easy for the new regime to take control. The Stasi had resistance throughout its existence, but the most impactful resistance movement was on December 4th, 1989, when a group of citizens overran the Stasi officers outside their headquarters. The citizens stormed and occupied the building before the Stasi officers inside could complete the destruction of all the files they had on their citizens. This resistance movement was very important because it showed people were overcoming their fear of the Stasi and their paranoia about their neighbors. The Stasi was disbanded on October 3, 1990, when the GDR officially came to an end. Several officers and agents were recruited into Russian companies or became politically active. Like the Gestapo, their headquarters was made into a museum. The Committee for State Security of the Soviet Union, also known as the KGB, was formed on March 13, 1954, as the main security agency for the Soviet Union. The KGB had a main chairman with a deputy underneath him and several directorates below them. The last known chairman of the KGB was Vladimir Khrushchev, who was in office from 1988 to 1991. The KGB was organized like a military service and operated under Soviet Army laws with several rank structures to establish a chain of command. They also had separate KGBs set up in the different satellite countries under Soviet control. Each KGB had up to 16 directorates and a guard detachment for each. Like the Stasi, the KGB was also considered one of the most effective information-gathering agencies the world has seen. The KGB focused on internal security, intelligence gathering, and other secret police operations. They had spy agents and intelligence relayers who performed legal and illegal espionage both inside and outside the country. They also focused on suppressing internal dissent within Russia and within their other satellite countries. Their most notable operations were in Bangladesh, India, and Afghanistan. As with the other secret services, the KGB used fear and paranoia tactics to control its citizens. Rumors and stories of the KGB and the amount of propaganda used against the Soviet Union during the Cold War is what still causes some people to not trust Russia today. Their involvement in Afghanistan also had drastic impacts on world history as well as their relations with other countries. The KGB often faced resistance from anti-communist political and religious views. They combated this resistance with harsh house raids, arrests, and smear campaigns. The KGB met its destruction in August 1991 during a coup d'état attempt. The last chairman of the KGB and 7 other leaders attempted to overthrow the Soviet Union government. While they successfully arrested the president, the coup did not last more than a few days. After this event, the Federal Counterintelligence Service and the Federal Secret Service ultimately replaced the KGB. All 3 services shared similarities in their organization. Each service had separate task force or divisions for their occupied territories and political opponents. All 3 also engaged in counterintelligence and espionage operations, as well as closely monitoring and prosecuting their citizens. As I mentioned throughout the video, all of them used fear, paranoia, and torture methods, which left traumatic impacts on the members of society. All 3 also had similar forms of resistance. Each faced resistance from religious groups and from general opposition. A difference I noticed in the forms of resistance was that the Gestapo resistance was much less open. I attribute this not only to the fact that many of the resistance leaders were arrested and executed, but that the country was also at war. The Gestapo also had a form of resistance that wasn't found in the other 2 services, and that was Operation Valkyrie. None of the other services had a top military brass making a resistance and assassination attempt. Another difference was how in-depth the Stasi were in monitoring their citizens. None of the other services had a division for garbage analysis.